Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you so much again for joining us. Here's our contact information if you'd like to weigh in on any of the topics of the day. All right, everything working good. Getting an update with the audio, making sure we don't have a problem again. So please feel free to contact me at any time. A couple of quick things to get to. Obviously, we're going to talk about Senator Menendez. That story broke after Friday's program, so we'll talk about that. The new poll that has come out that shows Donald Trump in the lead over Joe Biden. That's an ABC News poll, I believe. We'll talk about that as well. Maybe a few things here about the government shutdown, some New York issues. First, I saw this over the weekend. It's a little bit of old news, but in case you missed it, it's pretty remarkable. Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, who's been in hospice care since February. And if you recall, I believe it was his grandson came out and said there's not much time left. That was all the way back in February. Well, he was spotted with his wife, Rosalind, visiting the Plains Peanut Festival in their Georgia hometown. Again, a kind of a surprise appearance or a dramatic appearance because the ex-president has been in hospice since early February, when his grandson expected him to live about 5 days longer. 7 months later, Carter is 1 week away from his 99th birthday. He is the longest living American president. So good news to hear Jimmy Carter is out and even doing public events. Pretty remarkable when we heard again from his grandson all the way back in February that it did not look good. So really encouraging news there and almost hitting his 99th birthday. Okay, let's talk about Senator Bob Menendez. A lot of people are now calling for him to resign. Now, prosecutors, if you're not aware with this story, I'm sure you are by now, but are accusing Menendez and his wife of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, in cash, gold, lavish gifts, and other expenses in exchange for using his power to benefit a trio of New Jersey businessmen. There's some connections there with Egypt as well. But anyway, Senator Chuck Schumer said Friday that Menendez stepping down as committee chair is temporary until the matter has been resolved because he's on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Over the weekend, AOC said it shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat and that the details in this indictment are extremely serious. I think what is here in this indictment is quite clear. She added that Menendez resigning from the Senate is, quote, in the best interest to maintain the integrity of the seat, but added that everyone should be given the presumption of innocent until proven guilty. Now, Representative Andy Kim, a Democrat out of New Jersey, said Saturday he will run against Menendez in 2024. He said it's not something I expected to do, but added that the state deserves better per a statement on formerly Twitter. So a lot of growing criticism of Bob Menendez, a lot of people saying he should resign. But did you know, this coming from the New York Post this morning, that he is expected to announce his re-election bid today at a press conference, days after the bribery charge. I'm not going anywhere, he said, calling himself a victim of an active smear campaign of anonymous sources and innuendos. Dick Durbin of Illinois, the Senate's number 2 Democrat, stopped short of calling on Menendez to step down. Quote, keep in mind, these are charges and they have to be proven, he said. John Fetterman, someone we've been talking a lot about because of the dress code change, said Menendez, quote, cannot continue to wield influence over national policy, especially given the serious and specific nature of these allegations. I hope he chooses an honorable exit. Now, they figured around $480,000 in cash was discovered, much of it stuffed into envelopes and hidden in a safe, closet, and clothing, including a jacket emblazoned with the Senate logo, according to the indictment. You may have seen the photos by now. But yes, according to the New York Post, he is going to announce that. I don't have that in front of me either. Oh, there it is. He is expected to defiantly announce today that he will seek re-election less than a week after being indicted on explosive corruption charges. Yes, much less than a week. It happened on Friday after this program. Now, he did say he's not going anywhere. He's not going to resign. Monday's expected press conference would be his first in-person appearance since he and his wife were charged with taking bribes. He's expected to announce his plan to run for office again in 2024, even if he needs to run outside the Democrat Party. That's according to the New Jersey Globe. The longtime senator will speak in Hudson County, where he grew up and launched his political career nearly 50 years ago. But it remains unclear exactly when and where he will appear, the outlet said. Well, we're going to keep an eye open on that. I hope that's a breaking news story. I hope we cut into some programming to be able to watch that. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. One other thing, we're going because I'm running late. We're going to take a break, but we will talk about what the former president, Donald Trump, had to say about this indictment when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We do not have an M.A. Neal Financial Services section of the program this morning. I knew we had so much to catch up on that I wanted to just spend this time with you. But thank you always to M.A. Neal Financial Services for when we do have a sponsored interview. Okay, so President Trump, former President Trump, weighed in on Bob Menendez's indictment. I believe he took to social media, his Truth page, and he said Senate Democrats should all resign based on Senator Bob Menendez. They all knew what was going on and the way he lived. Why doesn't the FBI raid Senate Democrats' homes like they illegally raided Mar-a-Lago, where nothing was done wrong based on the Presidential Records Act? Can you imagine how much crooked Joe Biden has stolen? And what's in some of his many homes? The FBI and Justice notified him that they would be going in for a look in a few weeks. In other words, get rid of the cash, gold, and documents ASAP before we get there. They didn't give me any warning. They just showed up. So Bob Menendez expected, and I'm sure you've seen it before, but expected to hold a press conference today running for re-election. Now, that's the definition of defiant. Interesting. What is your take on that? Should he resign? It is interesting. AOC suggested he should resign. So you are seeing some calls from his own party to step aside. Now, speaking of the former president, we're going to go through a lot this morning. So deal with me here. This is big news. This is arguably the biggest story of the day. Trump edges out Biden 51 to 42% in a head-to-head matchup, according to a new poll from ABC News and I think it was Wall Street Journal, maybe, or Washington Post. President Joe Biden's job approval rating is 19 points underwater. His ratings for handling the economy and immigration are at career lows. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to have some graphics up on the screen for you in just a little bit, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So I mentioned Trump is edging out Biden 51 to 42% in a head-to-head matchup. Now, this does not take into consideration Cornel West either. And now, and we'll get to this in a little bit and dive more in depth to it, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may be looking at a Libertarian Party run. So this is another disastrous poll coming out off of probably 2 weeks ago. A very bad poll for the president. His job approval rating is 19% or 19 points underwater. Let me put up the graphic too if you want to see that. His ratings for handling the economy and immigration are at career lows. A record number of Americans say they've become worse off under his presidency. That's why they keep pushing the Bidenomics, I don't know what you'd want to call it, public relations, trying to convince you that never mind how tough it is to buy groceries or just to survive, the economy's doing great because of Bidenomics. 3/4 say he's too old for another term, and Donald Trump is looking better in retrospect. All severe challenges for Biden in his re-election campaign ahead. Now, they said that he is actually working behind the scenes campaign-wise, because that's something we brought up on the program. Excuse me. Oops, gotta add my wave there. Last week, that the campaign has been mysteriously silent, and that's why many started to speculate that maybe he isn't going to run for re-election. But as so many have said, there's nothing anybody can do. If he wants to run, he can run. He's the incumbent. But I'll continue. So 50 or 44% of Americans in the latest ABC News Washington Post poll say they've gotten worse off financially under Biden's presidency, and most for any president in the poll since 1986 when they first began. Just 37% approve of his job performance, 37%, while 56% disapprove. Still, fewer approve of Biden's performance on the economy, just 30%. So very troubling numbers for the president. Again, that's coming out of Washington Post ABC News poll. Biden and former President Donald Trump appear headed for a rematch, as we know, although more than 3 in 5 Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents say they would prefer a nominee other than the current president. But Biden's advisors have argued that he is the strongest Democrat for 2024, and those who wish for someone else share no consensus on who that should be. 8% naming Vice President Harris, 8% naming Bernie Sanders, and 20% saying they prefer just someone else. But to have the former president, Donald Trump, 10 points ahead of Biden, even with all of the, you see the media criticism of Trump and you see the propping up of the current president. So this is really, really troubling. And I don't know, we've got to ask the question, what will Democrats do? We've started to see some rumblings of maybe he shouldn't run. Some of the pundits like the Van Joneses that I keep mentioning, saying these numbers are disastrous. We should start making a contingency plan. But again, it's really up to the president. Now, the New York Post has a piece on this from Daniel McCarthy. And it says, Democrats chose Biden, now they're doomed in 2024. If Joe Biden is their nominee, Democrats will lose the White House next year. That conclusion gets harder to deny with each passing week. But what can Democrats do about it? Progressive pundits have reacted with denial, anger, bargaining. The once mainstream polling analyst Larry Sabato could only rage on Twitter. Quote, it's a ridiculous outlier. Trump up 10 over Biden, laughable. Okay. My question, how could you even publish a poll so absurd on its face? Well, what's so absurd about it? Just because you don't disagree with, or just because you disagree with it? Where would the profession be if pollsters discarded the data every time they didn't like what their surveys told them, according to Daniel McCarthy? Behind the numbers are some basic facts Democrats will ignore at their own peril. The president's age and questionable capacity to do his job are serious concerns for voters. With 74% of those, ABC polled saying Biden is too old for another term. You've got to remember, it's not just another 4 years. You've got all next year as well. So you've got 5 years at this stressful job. Doubts about his fitness will grow as voters see more of him on the campaign trail. And, you've had example after example just last week of these quote unquote gaffes, embarrassing gaffes, saying an inappropriate term about LL Cool J. That was just, I believe, on Friday, maybe even Saturday, but we'll continue. Only 23% approve of the way Biden is handling immigration. He fares little better when voters are asked about the economy. Just 30% approve of his performance. In contrast, the public now sees the Trump years more favorably. Time heals a little bit here. And when you're struggling to make do, to get by, you start to look at maybe the past with some, not rose-colored glasses, but say, hey, wasn't all that bad. Twitter might got out of hand a little bit, but this isn't all that bad. So ABC gauged approval for Trump's record at 38% when he left office. Now that's up to 48%. Democrats can choose to read only polls that tell them a reassuring story. But the thing about that, according to Daniel McCarthy, is those polls are fewer and farther between. Yeah, we haven't seen a very positive poll on Biden in quite some time. Yet a scenario in which the Democrats dump Biden is hard to envision. First, there's the president himself, who won't go gently into that good night. Yeah, he won't. And that's, what can they do? They can't boot him out. Democrats sealed their fate when they picked Biden-Harris in the first place. Yes, the Republicans could still blow it, but Joe Biden means the race is theirs to lose, says Daniel McCarthy. Well, is it? Is it the Republicans to lose? That's interesting, because there's so many candidates out there trying to push that they're the only ones that can beat Biden, that Trump can't, beat Biden. So will someone step in, like the Nikki Haley's that the media keep pushing, or a Tim Scott or DeSantis, or will the nomination end up going to, and it looks almost inevitable, go to the former president? So as I mentioned, Biden is his campaign is off and running, according to the Washington Post, out of public view. Off and running against Trump, out of public view. But that's really similar to last go around as well. Obviously, the cliche became that Biden was campaigning from his basement. But as that piece said by Daniel McCarthy, the more that he's out there on the campaign circuit, going to rallies or whatever the case may be, the more opportunities for gaffes, for opportunities to question his mental health and physical health. So it goes through and talks about some of the mistakes he's made, but also about the fundraisers that he's held. Nearly 5 months in, the Biden campaign remains, by design, a mostly behind-the-scenes operation. Now, this seems like kind of a fluff piece. We want to be behind the scenes. We want to be quiet. Save the steady stream of television ads popping up in swing states and on cable news. Those are the ones that are trying to convince you that Bidenomics is actually a positive thing, actually been a good thing for the country. There have been no solo campaign rallies and just a few public political events with supportive labor or activist groups. The swing state officials won't open for weeks or months, along with a major push for volunteers, so their state offices. When Vice President Harris makes stops on a college tour this month to excite young people about voting, she's doing it in her official capacity. So the Biden campaign is off and running against Trump, just out of public view. All right, weigh in on all of these issues and many more. You see the number on the bottom of the screen. Thank you to those who sent the virtual wave. Thank you to people walking down the street that actually waved. I appreciate it. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday morning. I have to, before we talk more about the presidential election, I just have to mention this real quickly. We were talking about the disastrous poll numbers for Biden. It did not mention in those pieces much about the impeachment inquiry. Well, Representative James Clyburn was asked on NBC's Meet the Press this weekend about the impeachment. Anchor Kristen Welker said, "Let me ask you about the impeachment inquiry that is going to unfold this week on Capitol Hill. I know you and your Democrats have called this pure politics, but big picture. They're trying to see if there's any link between Hunter Biden and the president and his business dealings. Are you comfortable of a family member profiting off of the last name in this town?" So James Clyburn said, we all, to some extent, live so that our children can be proud of the name we've given them. I have 3 daughters, and I want them to feel very comfortable being a Clyburn. I do know that this is very, very important for going forward, but that doesn't mean they want them to do things that are unseemly to the name. I do want them to use the name to their benefit. So kind of justifying here, already laying down the groundwork. Well, no, you should use the Biden name. Well, Welker said, President Biden, according to one witness testimony, was on the phone 20 times with Hunter Biden's business associates and described as pleasantries. But is that appropriate? So James Clyburn, this is why I bring this all up, because this may be the talking point going forward. I think it's appropriate to be a father to your son. And if your son is having a problem, and we all know the history of the problem that Hunter has with addiction, and he is being a father to his son. Here we go. You don't impeach a man for being a father to his children. So that was something they started off with early on to bring up the addiction issue with Hunter, to try to, atone for any mistakes he made. And now as it nears some of the information getting closer to the president, now he's just being a father to his son. Can you punish somebody for that? So I could see that being the talking point. That's why I wanted to mention it to you quickly before you get back to the presidential race. Hopefully also we'll have an opportunity to bring up a couple of New York State issues on both sides of the coin. I have commentary about the new vote by mail that Governor Hochul signed in. We'll talk about that, hopefully. But first, I hinted towards this story. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is flirting with the Libertarian Party. Now, I know many of you have been reaching out, talking about RFK. We received quite a few great comments that it really is hard to fathom that the White House has denied Wow, sorry, I just had a weird noise come up. The White House has denied him Secret Service protection. I think that is a bad move by the White House. But for months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said he plans to continue his long shot challenge against President Biden in the Democratic primary rather than dropping out to launch a third-party bid. But lately, Mr. Kennedy's message has seemed to shift, including publicly telling a voter who asked about his plans that he was keeping his options open. Well, he might have seen how the media